Okay, so if you could erase one episode of Little House on the Prairie, which one would it be?
Oh God. If I could erase one episode of Little House on the Prairie, what would it be? Probably the goat, Fred. There was no purpose for that episode, really.
Yeah, well, when you're doing 26 episodes a season, some of them just aren't the goat.
The goat's got to go.
From the heart of Hollywood, it's the Patrick LabyorShoaux with Patrick Labyorteaux.
It's the Patrick LabyorShoaux. Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.
Tonight's episode, Melissa Gilbert.
Patrick LabyorShoaux. He's the one you gotta know.
Okay, of course you know her as Laura from Little House on the Prairie, but I know her as the smartest girl in my class. Please welcome Melissa Gilbert.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so obviously we know each other from Little House on the Prairie. I think you've heard about it. My reference there was we did go to school on the set, and I was enrolled in some sort of new age school, and you were enrolled in Buckley, which is like a full on great school, and you were like you were speaking French and doing math, and I was like off in a corner like making mud pies. But yeah, you've always been super smart, so I've always thought of you as like one of my smartest friends. Act 1, beginnings. So let's go just a little bit, because you're famous. Everyone kind of knows your story. But what I'm kind of interested in is, obviously you come from a showbiz family, but that doesn't mean that you wanted to be in showbiz. Obviously you did. So what was it that made Melissa, the little kid, go, I want to do this?
Well, I mean, at first, I don't think it was necessarily my decision. Yeah, my family goes back multiple generations in the entertainment business. I mean, to the point where my dad's parents, my dad's mom was a trapeze artist in France, and my dad's dad was an Irish vaudevillian. And when my dad was a kid, he was shipped off to live with a family of flyers, trapeze artists in Buenos Aires, and then grew up in Ringling Brothers Circus on the trapeze. So, and that
they call that trafficking now.
Yes, exactly. And then on my mom's side, they go way back as well with my grandfather and stuff. And it turns out, and we'll talk, if we want to get into adoption stuff later, we can. But my birth family also, my birth mother, as it turns out, was a dancer, possibly exotic. And my birth father was a stock car racer, but also a musician, and all the kids are performers on both sides of that family. So it was genetic and environmental. But I started when I was 2. So I don't think, I
sat Barbara down and said, listen, I've got a plan.
Yeah, I'm really tired of just sitting around doing nothing. I need a job. I think it was obvious, like we would go on the road with my dad, and I would stand in the back of whatever nightclub he was performing in, and I would do his whole act. And the audiences, they had to take me out of the room. Anytime there was a stage, I would run up and start dancing and singing and blowing kisses. And so it was pretty clear that it was in me. I was kind of born with jazz hands. So at 2, when my mom's friend said she should be doing commercials, and, this was 1966, my mom took me to my first audition, and I don't remember this. She does, because it was so humiliating, because she thought for sure people thought she told me to do this. But when we walked into the room, they took me in the room, and all the creatives, the director and everybody of this Carter's baby clothes commercial, were sitting cross-legged on the floor. And I ran past everyone and climbed on the director's lap and threw my arms around his neck and kissed him on the cheek. And my mom was like, oh, God, please, I hope they don't think I told her to do that. And I've been doing versions of that ever since. Like, I wanted to do this thing.
You sexually assaulted them, and you got the gig.
And I got the job. And then that morphed into just lying. Like I would go into a commercial audition and whatever the product was, it was my favorite. Oh, my dad uses that deodorant. I love that mustard. Whatever it was my favorite. I would lie about my abilities, my capabilities. I told people I did things I hadn't yet done just to get the part because I loved being on the set so much. It was so much fun.
I totally get that as far as being on the set and loving that, but also just because I know you, and of course we know my brother. My brother and you share something very similar but different, which is I think you both like to win. Now, you like to win, but not at the expense of like being bad to other people. My brother likes to win no matter what. But like, was it part of the competition too? That sense of like you wanting to, because I remember wanting to get the job, like it's part of a competition. Was that any part of it, or was it just to get to the end result?
Yeah, no, it was definitely competition. And I think if memory serves, I think like if we got the job, we'd get a quarter and then we could spend it any way we wanted to, which is hilarious. In hindsight, that was my cut. So there was that. And then also, I mean, I am competitive. I also, I started studying dance when I was the same age, when I was like 2, and I always wanted to be the best one in the class. And now I've had to temper that as I've aged because it's one thing. I'm in upstate New York at our home in upstate New York right now. And I go to a yoga studio down the road and all the women, the majority of the women in there are my age or older. Uh-huh. But if you put me in a yoga studio in New York City with a bunch of bendy 20-year-olds, I will hurt myself because I'm trying to be like them or be better. And there's just no way at 61. So I've still got that. I'm trying to learn how to temper that competitive thing and not have it in there. But I think that was just ingrained in me too. It was just in me. I wanted to win. I wanted to be the best one.
We'll be back after these messages. Have you ever thought about becoming an actor and making your friends and family jealous? Well, have I got a deal for you. Here at Working Actors School, we offer many different classes so you can become a famous actor like me. And we have a delightful selection of classes, including Adult Weekly. It's every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Here you will learn how to be an actor with other adults. How do we do it? How is it possible? Is it a miracle? Yes, it is. A miracle called Zoom. We teach everything online so you can become a famous actor and impress your friends and family. So if you want to be a famous actor and make your friends and family jealous, then you need to sign up at Working Actors School. You can get a hold of us at workingactorschool.com. You can sign up for classes at workingactorschool.com. You can make a reservation for the class online at workingactorschool.com. So come check us out. It's workingactorschool.com. Act 2, Success. We'll jump around here. Usually there's a structure to this, but just because so much is known about you and I know you so well, that like when you were doing Little House, obviously, and then usually when someone does a project on the hiatus, it's like some guest starring part in something. But you did Splendor in the Grass, and you also did The Miracle Worker, which were like not small projects by any means. And it wasn't like you messed around. It was like you went, Patty Duke, that's the one I'll go get. And it's like you made those movies. You didn't just them, but you made them.
Yeah, that was my production company. That was Half Pint Productions, which we established when I was 14. My mother, who had up to that point been managing my career, decided that it could be more than any of us thought it could be. And so she took me to meet with a real manager, Ray Katz, Uncle Ray, who at that time, had created the Osmond Empire, Cher, Dolly Parton, Lily Tomlin. These were all clients. And so I was the kid. And my mom and I had talked about things I wanted to do. And she'd shown me The Miracle Worker. And I said I would love to play that role at some point. So when he asked me what I wanted to do, I said The Miracle Worker. And he said, okay, let's do it. And it was them, and I think the network ultimately, that said, what about Patty Duke as Annie Sullivan? And they came to me and I went, yeah, sure. Jumping headlong into it too. And we did it as a play. That was my first time on stage also before we did the movie.
How did you find, I don't even know how to ask this, to be on stage with Patty Duke as your first time? that whole experience was a mind blower because
there was so much pressure that I didn't really feel. And I did the best that I could to sort of interpret what I thought might be Helen Keller's life and experience, but I was missing a lot. So before we left we did the play in Palm Beach, Florida. The producers sat my mom down, and everybody said, she's not getting it. There's something wrong. And I remember I had strep throat right before we left to go rehearse on the stage and open the show. And my mom took me to her former acting coach, Jeff Corey, who lived in Malibu at the time. And I remember him giving me milk that had acidophilus in it because it's supposed to be really good if you have an infection. And then he took me out to his studio and, we talked for a while. And I'd worked with him the tiniest bit before, right before Little House, actually. He worked with me on the narration because I sounded... It wasn't what I wanted, and my mom took me to him, and he said, he actually gave me one thing, and he said, why don't you read it like you're a grandmother telling the stories to your grandchildren? And that's what I did, and then it worked. Yeah, it was a really sweet note. This was different. He took me out to the studio, and he promised me he wouldn't hurt me, and that I wouldn't hurt myself. But then he blindfolded me, put earplugs in, and turned the lights out, and just threw me around the room and threw furniture in my way while I was walking around for about an hour and a half. And that's how I, through that process, developed how I moved, because I realized that for Helen, unless she knows exactly where she's going, it's new, so she doesn't want to leave. So I was always kind of staying back but reaching out. And then we went, and then Patty Duke, who was amazing, not just as a partner to do this with, but all of the wisdom that she had from past productions. She'd been on Broadway, she'd done the movie. The last thing I was having trouble with was my only line, wah wah. I was having a really hard time getting it out where it sounded the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
And she said, do you want me to tell you what they told me? And I said, yeah. She said, say it like you're really constipated and you can't poop. That simple. So once I got that, everything sort of fell into place. And then our first preview, they had created this entrance for me from center stage back down right to the edge of the stage at 0, center stage. And where's Helen? She's in whatever. Oh, here she comes now. And I come running down stage and stop at the edge of the stage with my arms outstretched. And the first time I did it, the first 3 rows of people stood up to catch me. And my little 14-year-old self went, this is the greatest thing I have ever experienced in my life. They think I'm her. I got them.
Yeah,
It was mind-boggling. And that was, doing the movie after 6 weeks of that play it was a brilliant idea to do it that way. Because by the time we shot the movie, we'd all knew exactly what we were
everything
doing.
you needed. It's like that was your rehearsal, and of course it's not rehearsal. It's even better because it's a full bore performance, which you usually don't do in rehearsal because you're holding something back. But with a live audience, you're getting things that you would never get from people on a set because they're supposed to be quiet. They wouldn't stand up to catch you.
No, and there's so much physical choreography in that show, especially in that big long fight in the dining room with Annie and Helen. So having the chance to do that together repeatedly and literally slapping each other across the face on stage every night as hard as we could for multiple performances. By the time we shot it, no one was intimidated. We knew exactly what we were doing. We were completely comfortable with each other, bruised and in pain, but we did it. And that sort of set the tone for all of our productions. We didn't do them all as plays, but we did rehearse them like plays, and then we would perform them for the crew, because most of the time the crews don't really read what you're doing. And so, or back then at least. And so we did that when we did the Diary of Anne Frank. We did that when we did Splendor in the Grass. And so that was...
Well, it was, I remember thinking back at the time, I'm going to do a Love Boat. It's like, that's my hiatus project. And then, you went off and did these movies, which, again, were super ambitious, and you pulled it off. You were nominated for an Emmy for the Miracle Worker, and then the next year for Little House. So there's a lot going on. Staying within this acting idea here, I had a chance to work with Patty Duke on a Karen Song, a sitcom that she did. I only worked with her for a week, and she was just delightful, so warm, so welcoming, so everything. I can't imagine spending that much time that deep into a character, which was such a big part of her career. So everyone's going to ask you about Michael, but the one thing I want to ask you about Michael is you're just a baby when you were on this show. Yet, you ended up being such a good actor. What did you learn, or what was taught to you from that relationship watching Mike perform, or what did you learn from Michael as an actor?
Geez, there's so much. I came into it, I was really lucky to have had the parents that I had, as far as not, so many kid actors have parents who work with them and read with them and give them line readings and make it seem like it's their way, and then they go and it's different and they can't adjust and it makes you uncomfortable, and you're looking at your parents but you're doing it differently and they don't want the parent around anymore. It can get prickly, as you know. Yeah. My mom really didn't do that, oddly enough. As much of a stage mom as she was, she sort of navigated my career, but once we shot the pilot, she wasn't, I don't know if you remember, she was almost never on the set. We had set sitters.
Yeah.
She'd come every once in a while because she also had a baby at home. She had my sister.
Right, she would come in with Sarah. That's when I would remember seeing her.
Yeah, she would come and visit her. She would come for special episodes or special scenes or something. And basically, all she ever told me was to listen. That was it. She just said, listen. Because you never know what someone else is going to say. It could be wrong. It could be different. You have to be prepared to respond appropriately. So that was what I was armed with when I showed up on the set for the pilot. And Michael just sort of really, for all of us littles, Melissa, Sue, myself, and the babies, Robin and Rachel, he just sort of nurtured performances out of us. It was just very easy with him. He just, he would praise us when we did well. And then he would, scowl if we weren't completely connected. I think he found us all really enchanting. And he hired kids who were very natural, intentionally. So we didn't come in with cuteness. We came in with just a kind of grounded. And at the time, I just remember thinking, boy, this is the best game of dress up any girl ever played.
Yeah.
It was just fun, It wasn't a job.
Well, it's amazing that you say, I think what's really smart about it was with Barbara telling you to listen, it seems, if you're not an actor, it seems like, oh, that's just simple, advice. But it's like some of the best advice you can ever give or teach or understand as an actor, especially, and it helps when you're working with someone that's giving a performance like a Michael Landon, where if you're listening and you're watching Michael's performance, I don't care who you are, if you're a foot away from Michael and he starts crying, you're not going to do anything but lose it, right?
Yeah,
exactly. It's like every scene I did with Michael was like so much better than every scene I did with anyone else, because you like you say, if you listen, your brain and your mind and your face do all the things that it needs to do because you're watching him emote for real. Yeah. And I would love to have asked him at that point, because obviously he was the classic guy that would be able to tell a joke up to marker and then be crying over the loss of something and be as true as possible to both things.
Yep.
And so, when you're working on a show like this and you're growing as an actor, when you get to the point of the show kind of being over, what did you see for what you wanted after Little House? Because this had been your entire life. It did double your life.
It definitely had. I had already, and make no mistake, I also did a Love Boat. For the Miracle Worker and all of that stuff.
Okay.
I had established my company, and I knew I kind of wanted to continue in that direction. I was a little bit rudderless for a while there, trying to figure out where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. Also reveling in the freedom of, you know, once I got over the grieving process of saying goodbye to everyone we were working with and letting go of what I thought my life was going to be for years and years and years more. Then I just was really an active 19-year-old, getting into trouble, doing things I shouldn't be doing with people I shouldn't be doing them with. I was very involved in my social life, and that sort of, I mean, I was doing other jobs, and then I got my first feature film not long after that.
Sylvester, or was it something? Yeah, okay.
It was Sylvester.
Who, again,
And
with Richard Farnsworth, is just such a... I never met him, but his son Diamond was our stunt coordinator on JAG, so I knew his son. And I loved his son, but I never met Richard. I would imagine what a guy he was.
A gem of a human. Just a gem of a human. An absolute down-to-earth, salt of the earth. Everything you would imagine him to be was exactly who he was. Kind, conscientious, funny, hardworking, generous. He was great. And that process, you know, I had to go through that whole audition process and back and forth. And the director we were working with was very difficult and didn't want me, and made it very clear and actually told me flat out, I don't really want you for this, but the studio pressured me into it. So here we are. We're going to cut your hair off. We're going to change everything about you. And I was like, wow, he really doesn't like me. And it was my first time on location without a guardian, which created lots of mischief, to say the least. Although I did work my butt off. And, you know, I had to train for months before with the horses and learn how to do not just the regular horse stuff, but then all of the eventing Olympic horse stuff. So that was, you know, that consumed me for a couple of years there until it came out and didn't do well and kind of went away. And I figured it probably wouldn't. And then I just sort of, I produced another couple movies a week. And then I auditioned for an off-Broadway play in New York, and I got it. And so I shucked my whole life and moved to New York to do a Sheaux and Tell, and that, again, changed everything. Terrified me, but changed everything. And there I was at 22, living on my own with my cat and my dog in New York City, and completely unprepared to live on my own entirely. Completely. Like I didn't.
Yeah, this is like when you moved out, and I remember you moved out. It was a big move. It was past the pool. It was all the way in the back of the yard. And you had like a little guest house out there that was a sweet, sweet setup. You were driving your station wagon, so you were a bitchin' looking chick in a station wagon. And you were dating like guys like Rad and Rob and all these cool dudes. And it was like, yeah, you had the full-on Encino, Encino life. But I mean, still, you're still super smart, so you could figure it out. But it's not the same.
Big brave. Yeah, 18 years old. I moved 18 feet from my mother's bedroom. When I moved to New York, though, was when the rubber really met the road, and I had to figure out how to do so much stuff that I had no clue about. Like I didn't realize that you could break $100 bill at a bodega, and you didn't have to go to a bank. It's little things like that. I didn't know how to clean the toilet. I didn't know. I mean, I actually, at one point, I let the dishes pile up in my sink so bad, and I didn't have a dishwasher, so I threw them out and bought new dishes. Thank God. Yeah. On my, $700 a week salary at that point. Genius.
Right. It's just, and again, kids in the business, and let's talk just a little bit about that. And with the idea that it's a weird deal where the job that we're doing, right, is exactly the same job that the adult actors are doing, but you got to go to school. So it's like Robert De Niro is doing the same job I'm doing, but then I've got to go to school. You're doing the same job, not Michael, because Michael is doing 5 other jobs as well, but like any actor on the show. And when you're faced with that, and you've got all of these things going on, like you said, you said it, and I'm still shocked, and I was there, that you were only 19 when this came. It's like you had a personal life at 19, and it was like, what was it like for Melissa Gilbert, who Sorry, I'm monologuing here a little bit, but
That's okay.
for the people watching, we're all kind of the same age. That's who watches this show, so they get it. Back in the '70s, if you were a TV star, you were a TV star.
Yeah.
There was no internet or anything where everybody knew anything about you. If you weren't in the Enquirer or the Star, then you were just whatever people believed you were on the TV. So here you are, America's sweetheart, literally. Maybe a few years ago, they let you take the pigtails out, but now you're 19, you're a real life woman, and you're out in Hollywood. For you, Melissa, was it difficult to like convince people or like have realistic relationships with friends or people or boys that didn't expect you to be like Laura?
It was weird. I think people still almost into my 40s always kind of half expected a 12-year-old to come in with a fishing pole, in gingham. And that at that time was to me felt like a weakness. Ultimately, it ended up being a strength because the shock factor of, wait a second, she's a full-grown adult with really, with opinions and ideas that are smart and work was something that I used to my advantage, certainly later on. At that point, though, it's weird for kid actors too, because I think there's two ways we grow up. We either grow up super sheltered and don't know how to do things like wash dishes, or super overexposed and exploited. And I actually think that's where the big problems are with the kids who, who grew up, as they say, too fast. And,
Allison said something that I thought was really smart, and I'd never thought about it, which was we all had other kids on our show. Little House was known. In fact, all the kids that I keep talking to from the 70s acting always wanted to be on Little House, mainly because there was a bunch of kids on the show. It wasn't just one kid amongst a bunch of adults. And so I think that helped us.
That definitely helped us. And also, our set was as kid-friendly as a set could be at that time. Even with all the adult shenanigans going on, we were sort of protected from a lot of that. Like, I didn't know half the stuff that the grown-ups were doing until they started writing books about it.
Right.
I knew there was like a cooler of beer and there was hard liquor on the prop truck. And the cooler of beer was next to the cooler of soda, which was next to the waters, but whatever. We were encouraged to be kids. I don't know if you even consciously were aware, but like if they needed us to get rid of energy, if we were too energetic, they'd hand us a Frisbee or a football or a baseball and say, go play. If they needed us to be quiet, they'd hand us a board game or backgammon or sewing cards or looms, and we would sit still and just play quietly.
I was played.
You were played. They were really cognizant of our behavior also, and you guys I had food restrictions. You guys had health issue food restrictions.
Yeah.
And, but Michael really didn't want us kids eating sugar. It was kind of a thing that, it was impossible to get Allison to stop eating sugar. But the rest of us were encouraged not to eat sugar. And all the adults were watching out for us, too, because, give a kid a Coca-Cola and you got a hyperactive lunatic for an hour and then just crashing sadness the rest of the day.
And you could see that with the guest star kids who would come in sometimes and they would just fly around the set because they weren't in that type of zone that they had I didn't realize that we had been trained like that, but yeah, I totally get it because it was a very chill set relative to what you're saying with the time. I look back on that, and I had a really weird circumstance with you and Allison and the whole group. A couple of years ago, we did a convention, and we all went to the smokehouse, and we were all having dinner, and you and Allison started singing a song, the Siriaki Seafood Mama song. And I was like, I freaked out because it was like, that was a song that was from my childhood. And then I go, oh, right, this chick is from my childhood. It's like we were kids. It's like, oh, right, that's how long I've known these people. And so you grow up together and you see I watched all your different adventures, and, Rob would come to the set and you guys were boyfriend, girlfriend before he was Rob Lowe. And it was like, that's Melissa's boyfriend. And then he becomes Rob Lowe and it becomes something different. Or you get married or you get divorced, or you get married or you get divorced, and like all these different stories. But it's like, when it comes down to it, we were just kids. I wanted to, before we get out of the kids area, you and I were both adopted.
Yep.
Not connected adopted, but you were adopted, I was adopted. So is my brother, so is your brother, and then you've got a mixed family with Sara. When you were saying that your mom, your biological mom, which I didn't know you'd found, was also in the movie business, I found my biological mom, who was a adult film actor, and she was an actress back in the day. My dad was an actor. They'd come out to Hollywood to be actors, and then I was put up for adoption. I think from what I've read, you were adopted rather quickly. I was adopted rather slowly. And I found this book called The Primal Wound, which talks about being adopted and how for me, it was like I was 9 months before I was adopted. So I was training myself to gain attention and to figure out situations as a child to get a hug or to get love or whatever it was. Did you find, with that type of idea behind it, did you find that your being adopted affected your acting in any way or your life in a way that would be because of that?
I would say, and this is on me and the environment I grew up in, because I internalized a lot of this and wasn't able to really voice it until much, much later in therapy as an adult. But I knew that being adopted was great and special. My family talked about how special it was. My mom, one of the first books I learned how to read was called The Chosen Baby, and she crossed out all the names and put our names in the book. And so I thought they wrote a book about me. There was never a day where like all of a sudden they said, by the way, you're adopted. We always knew it was just part of the fiber of who we were. But I took it on myself and didn't share it because we didn't share feelings much. That I always had a thing in the back of my head that if I didn't do everything right, they would give me back.
Whoa, that's a lot to carry.
That's a lot to carry. And, it was sort of like ingrained. And then also because we didn't talk about things, everything was such a mystery. Like when my parents split when I was 6, it was just in the car one day, my mom said, Daddy's not going to live with us anymore, but everything's going to be normal. And at first, my first thought was, how is that? And then I just thought, well, they know. Of course it's going to be normal. But it wasn't.
Right.
But I kept saying to myself, this is normal, the new normal, I guess. And so it was just, things were not discussed or we didn't dive into stuff. It was just a kind of a given. I'm getting married again, and you're going to have a stepbrother and a stepsister. No, how do you feel? Everything, you want to talk it out? Should we go to counseling? It wasn't until years later that we started my step siblings, Patrice and Joey, had to go to therapy. But we were all considered fine because I never expressed any of it. I never said, I'm not comfortable. I just glared a lot. So the adoption thing was a thing. I think I'm well over it now, but there was always that little thing in my head.
That's not a little thing. I mean, because I was raised in the similar way of my origin story of being adopted was always what I understood. So to me, it wasn't any weirder than coming out of my mommy's body. It was just, that's what you knew. It was just sort of the way it is. But there was always for me that big, well, I wonder what my parents look like, or I wonder what their story was, which is why I decided to find and then sort of said, oh, wow, what a great, interesting story.
I did after my first child was born, because I assumed we all looked alike because we have the same mannerisms, my whole family. And then Dakota, when they brought him up to my face, when I saw him for the first time, I went, oh my God. He had my eyebrows and he had my lips, and I'd never seen anyone that looked like me. And then I realized there's got to be more. And then when I started searching, I found out that my mother, who was not a porn actor and not an actor, she was an exotic dancer. As far as I know, she wasn't in porn. And my birth father they were each married to other people and had 3 children each, and ran off together and conceived me on a motorcycle trip in the desert. Explains a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
they left their spouses for each other and got married after pregnant with me and moved all the kids in. So that I was number 7. So the decision was made to put me up for adoption.
How is this? I'm not how. I mean, obviously, it's not like we talked about everything in our life. I have 7 brothers and sisters as well.
Oh my
My
gosh.
father, I know, right? And the story that I tell is that when I found my mother, she had already passed away, but I found her family, and it's a very complicated story. But so I never met her, but I met her family, who was a step family. She had 3 kids that she had inherited with the husband that she married. So like she had 3 kids, but they weren't her biological kids. She only had 1 biological kid. The father had a lot of them. But they would watch Little House, and when I would show up on Little House because of my eyes, they would go, "Oh, that's probably your kid." And they would make fun of her like that. And it was like that, yeah, they were right.
My birth mother too passed away before I searched, so I only had my birth father to find, and I still haven't looked for her side of the family because there's too much. There's just too much.
Yeah.
But when I called him and told him I was his daughter, I didn't tell him who I was. And then he asked me, "Well, who are you? What do you do?" And I said, "Well, here's the thing." And I said, "Did you ever watch Little House on the Prairie?" And he said, "You're Laura, aren't you?" I knew it. He knew it. Like he could see. And when I met my half siblings, we all look alike. So you could definitely see it. So it's pretty clear.
For an adopted kid, that's a big deal, and I totally get that because it's something you just grow up not expecting it. And just while we're here, obviously Jonathan Gilbert played Willie on the show. My brother played Albert on the show. A bunch of other siblings were on the show, so it wasn't weird to work with your sibling. But then Sara comes along, and she ends up being an actor. What was that like for you, where you had your experience as an actor? You're living in the same house as all these other actors. Was it an acting thing, or was it just like, were you guys all doing your own thing? It just all happened to be acting in different. Jonathan was on Little House and then kind of went away, but
that
Sara,
was more what it was. But Sara started because she would watch us come home at Christmas with all of our cars, the cars all loaded up with gifts from the crew. And she decided she wanted that. And my mom said, "Well, if you want that, you have to be an actor." And that's how Sara started.
Well, okay. There's always a secret origin somewhere.
Yep.
So far, so good for Sara is all I got to say. I still remember her not walking in, being carried in by your mom looking like a Madame Alexander doll. She had her in these dresses that were so elaborate. I was like, how is this little baby even dealing with all of this?
She hated those dresses. I took her. We used to have, when I learned to drive, we used to have sister lunch every couple of weeks, and I would take her somewhere, and we would go have lunch. So I had to wait till I was 17 to do it. So she's 6, and I'm 17. And the time I took her to Melrose for lunch, and we had sister lunch, and we were walking by the Doc Martens store, and she saw the shoes. She went, "I want those." And I thought, my mom is going to hate me for this, but I took her in and bought her some Docs.
To me, that's Sara. That's who Sara is for sure. 100%. She knows herself. We'll be back after these messages. Hey there, I'm Patrick Labyorteaux, and I've been an actor since I was a little kid, so I know what it's like to be a little kid actor. So I have a class here called Youth Weekly, and that meets every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, and it is an awesome class if you are young and want to learn all about acting. We have a great set of kids, and it's taught on Zoom, so you can do it from anywhere. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on your laptop, on an iPad. It's awesome. I've had kids take a class while they were in the car coming back from soccer practice. I swear to you. So if acting is in your blood, come to workingactorschool.com and check out the Youth Weekly class every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. I'll see you there. Act 3, present day. Okay, so you're doing this acting thing. you finally come off a Little House. You're kind of wandering around the industry with all of the things that you're trying out, the plays and whatnot. I wanted to ask you. This is in my notes. This just shocked me that I said I have to share this with you. It's like, holy shit! I don't even understand it because I'm a guy. But here you are. You starred in a movie called Killer Instinct. You played Lisa DeVito. Mm-hmm. Here's how they describe it on IMDb.
Oh, God.
Woddy Harrelson stars in the story of psychiatrist Lisa DeVito and her battle to save a tortured man whose past has turned him to violence. One tragic incident seals his fate and shakes Lisa's faith in her profession. They don't even mention you, and you're the star of the movie. And I'm like, what? I mean, address it, I guess, because I can't. I don't know. But is that for real?
It's probably a combination of things. It's probably because Woddy Harrelson became a movie star, let's put his name first here at IMDb so we get more eyeballs, and maybe a little patriarchal also. Woddy was great to work with. We had a blast. I had a perfectly lovely time making that movie. I
was just curious because it was like I was looking at your credits and I'm like, oh no, okay, and I just couldn't get over the fact that they don't even mention the famous Melissa Gilbert. You did Stand By Your Man with Rosie O'Donnell, which was a sitcom, and just your thoughts on. I mean, Michael Landon was the gold standard of episodic drama television. He could knock one of those shows out in 5 days and it'd be great. No one on Netflix can seem to make more than 6 episodes every year, and it takes them 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Stand By Your Man's a sitcom, completely different situation. How did you like it? Did you hate it? What were your thoughts on the differences?
Oh my God, I loved it. I so wished that show had run longer, but it was in the beginning of Fox, had just become a network. So we were one of the first shows, and then Barry Diller brought us, or they brought us in, and we started the show, and then Barry Diller came in and he redid the whole slate and canceled us. We were doing pretty well. For me, the real sort of judge of whether or not I could do this was my grandfather, my mom's dad, because he created the Honeymooners. He wrote the D. Martin roasts. He was a consultant on all of Gary Marshall's shows.
Harry Crane's a legend.
Harry Crane's a legend. So. Yeah. When Papa Harry came to a taping, and Papa Harry was not an effusive human. He used very few words, and he chose them in fact, he was the one after my 400th movie of the week, and I said, did you watch? And he said, I'm getting tired of seeing you stare pensively out a window.
That's so hard. That's so hard.
It was right. He said, I need to see you in a road picture, like a buddy picture, like a cop something. But when he came to the taping of Stand By Your Man after that episode, and we went out after to grab a bite, and I said, so Papa Harry, what did you think? And he said, kid, you got chops. And I was like, oh man, that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a good argument that he invented the sitcom. I mean, basically.
More or less, yeah. They created.
It was a skit that was on his show that they spun off. So, yeah.
That was
figuring all of that out was not.
They were a sketch on the Jackie Gleason show. And here's something I just learned recently. You know the famous Lucy and Ethel candy conveyor belt chocolate scene in I Love Lucy. They originally did that on the Jackie Gleason show in a sketch with Art Carney and Jackie Gleason. My grandfather wrote it. So when Lucy did it, they had to pay my grandfather a royalty because it was his sketch.
Classic. I'd never heard that before.
Me neither. My mother, bless her heart, just told me maybe 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God. So, okay. So you did enjoy the experience on a sitcom. Did you and Rosie get along? I mean, I don't know Rosie.
Rosie and I got along great. We still get along great. We, it's like sisters when we run into each other. We don't see each other as much as we'd like to, but we got along really well. Rosie did not get along with anybody else. She got along with the actors, but the whole production team, it was new for her, and she was very tense. A League of Our Own either had just come out or was going to come out. This was her first foray into television. I thought she was hilariously funny, but she clashed a lot with the producers and the writers, and so I became the buffer. So she would tell me what she needed, and then I'd go
That's
in.
not surprising. That's not
Yeah.
surprising.
And of
You're
course,
always the peacemaker.
I took on the mantle of moderator quite easily.
So, okay, Batman, Barbara Gordon, I gotta love because I love comic books. So shout out. You did Sweet Justice with Cicely Tyson. Only in your career am I going, yeah, you did Sweet Justice with Cicely Tyson. Good job. Okay, moving on. I mean, it's like, what people don't understand is any one of these episodes of any of the shows that we've just talked about would be a massive hit in today's standards. It would be on the front page of like, I can't believe 25 million people watch this show. And back then it was like, good try, kid. Maybe next week you'll get 28 million. But let's go to SAG. You become SAG president. And I have them in my notes here in caps. Why? Why would you do this?
I still can't really tell you why. I mean, I can sort of. I had promised Richard Masser, because when he was president, they did a solid for me. They showed up when I sued the National Enquirer, and they were there in the courtroom with me every day. And so I said to him, if you ever need me, call. And of course, the call came, and he said, will you run for the board of directors? And I did. And I got elected. And on my first board meeting, this group there was like two factions in the guild, still are. They came and pulled me aside and said, the presidential elections are coming up next year, and we want you to run. And I said, you haven't even seen me in the boardroom yet. Are you nuts? I can't be the president of Screen Actors Guild. And they said, nobody can. There's no teaching school. James Cagney had no idea what he was doing. And I said, well, give me a minute and let me talk to some people. So, of course, the first person I called was Patty Duke, because she'd been president of Screen Actors Guild. And she said, do it. You'll learn more about yourself than you ever imagined you would know. And that's important. She said, and mostly you're going to learn how to say no, which is not your forte. And I was like, oh, great. So
both true, yeah.
Sort of existential lesson. Fab. Then I called, oddly enough, I called Warren Beatty. And I said...
As one does.
As one does. Well, he was always sort of an advisor in an
because of Splendor, or how did you
No,
let's be honest. Warren Beatty loves the ladies, and you are a beautiful lady. Was there a whole thing of like, hey, sister, what's up, pussycat?
I was a kid, and we met, and then I was a young adult, and we sort of like hung out in groups together, and then we
buffer zones.
Yeah, there was a friendship, a long friendship that still exists.
Okay.
And so when this came up, I was like, I got to bring out all the big guns. So I called him and I said, I don't want to do this. I said, I could run for vice president if you want to run for president. And he said, pardon my language, fuck you. I would rather be president of Cambodia. And I was like, well, great. He said, you should do it. And I said, why? If you want to be president of Cambodia, why do I need this job? He said, again, because you're going to learn so much about yourself. It was like this constant. So I thought, you know what? Why not me? I talked to my agents. I talked to my managers. Everybody went, we don't know enough about it. I was like, will I ever work again? They said, we'll see. Yeah. And so I ran, and the rest is history. And I served 2 terms for 4 years. And I learned more about myself than I've ever known in my life. I also negotiated a $200 million contract, which is now a $1 billion contract in today's money.
You were a good president. I mean, I can say that as a member. You were a really good president because you did everything you could to be moderate on the fair side. You didn't find your own ideas precious. You cared about the actor, which I really thought was a good way to look at everything.
Our goal was to get as much as we could without a ramp up or a work stoppage whenever possible. That was we had just come out of the 2000 commercial strike. A lot of that work had not come back. People were in a lot of pain, and I wanted to keep us working as much as possible with an eye toward the future. and merger was a part of that. We were the second step on the road to merger, and ultimately it did happen, which is a good thing. And I learned a lot about the industry. I met a lot of really fascinating people and had some really amazing experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I'm really glad I did it, and I'm glad I only did it for 4 years. And I feel like I walked away relatively unscathed, so that was good. I've never experienced that kind of antagonism before, though. Boy, there's a whole faction of people in that leadership at that.
I know the names. I won't mention the names. I've worked with a bunch of those names where they're just like, just slow your roll, dude. Just calm down.
They hate me. They hate me. But whatever. It's. We could talk about SAG-AFTRA for forever. I'll sum it up by saying.
Well, let's go. Let's transition from people who hate you. This is something to people who love you. I will get this wrong, so I want you to kind of take my lead here. You've told me a couple stories where it's like all of a sudden Melissa Gilbert is approached by, I don't know, Snoop Dogg or somebody from NWA or someone who watched Little House, and all of a sudden you're friends with someone that you would never have believed that you would interact with. Is that a correct way of saying that? I mean, I don't know who I forgot the guys you were telling me about, but it was like, how did you meet them? It's like, well, they came up to me. They watched Little House.
Yeah, it's odd. We were kind of a cult favorite in the industry and in different industries where people would go, don't tell anyone, but I watch your show all the time, or I watch the reruns constantly. I was in New York City. Tim was doing a series right after COVID that Curtis 50 Cent was executive producing. And they had a screening at the Soho House of the first episode to launch it. And Nicki Minaj was there. And I'm just, kind of like sitting by myself. And the next thing I know, someone grabs me and drags me over to Curtis and introduces me to 50 Cent. And he goes, oh my God, Little House on the Prairie. And Nicki goes, what? Wait, this is so not our demographic, I thought. But something also happened during the summer of COVID. And I noticed, I was watching it kind of unfold on Instagram. During that summer of all the racial unrest following George Floyd and Breonna, all of those horrible incidents, people discovered episodes of Little House like The Wisdom of Solomon. And the ones with the all of the stories about marginalized people and people of color, that the way Michael had told them, giving them this extraordinary humanity and purpose and telling the stories in a very raw way. And all of a sudden I'm reading, all of these people going, wow, Little House was woke. Megyn Kelly, be damned. And it's true. I mean, I learned stuff, about those struggles and issues shooting the show in the 70s. We were telling the stories of the 1970s through the lens of the 1870s. And there's a
Jewish guy telling the story of a Christian family. It's not like it was hidden, but people tend to just gloss over what they want to gloss over.
The people who worked on that show, there were Jews. I'm Jewish. Mike's Jewish. Mm-hmm. There were gay people in the cast and crew. There were people of all different stripes, religions, ideas, ideals, nationalities, all coming together to do that show. It was a very diverse group of people that worked on that show, and a lot of our stories were told. And I think that's part of why it's still appealing today, because so many of the stories still don't have the resolution that we want them to have. So we have to keep staying aware of who we were and who we are and where we want to go as far as being inclusive, kind, generous, open, accepting.
Well, what I loved about the stories back then and still obviously today, and the way that Michael tells stories, is it's all about love in the sense of what does your heart tell you? Is it right? Is it wrong? He's not dogmatic about anything. Is it fair? Are they good people or bad people? There's no judgment. It's just what is right what needs to be done needs to be done if there's an injustice out there. And I think during COVID, people found it. I mean, obviously, I've been doing the conventions. You do the conventions, but it's like you're a convention all by yourself wherever you go. But I need to be surrounded by Little House people before people go, oh yeah, you're on the show. But people found it in COVID to rewatch it, and because there's so many episodes, they could really dig in. And it became this huge thing until we finally had this 50th anniversary, which was out of this world crazy. Like 17, 20, 100,000 people. I don't know. It was a lot of people.
I think it was 25,000 people came to see me last year.
And I watched Tim bring you tea and try to tend to you, but it was like he was a medvac working with someone in the trenches, because you were seriously at your table with a line of women without question. Not one of them wasn't sobbing, waiting to hug you and tell you that you were the most important person in their life, because my mother had cancer, I have cancer, or I lost my child, or like, and I kept going, how? Because Melissa, you are one of the most, what's the word when you care for things? I'm such an actor. When you care, when you have emotion. Compassionate. Thank you. Yeah, you're empathetic. You're so empathetic that you're like a sin eater. You must have been exhausted.
Well, also, Tim was there being extra mindful too, because I just had neck surgery a couple of weeks before, so I really wasn't supposed to be hugging anyone. No, I just had an artificial disc put in my neck, and it was like 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks. And so I really wasn't supposed to be hugging anyone. And my immune system was a little depleted, so I really shouldn't have been breathing on people. And I was like, what am I going to do? This woman just came up to me and told me that her father beat her as a child. And she's crying because Little House was an escape. I have to at least pat her on the back. I was exhausted. I was completely depleted and stupid when it was over. I actually went on my way to, I went and stayed at my sister's for a couple of days after. But on my way back into LA proper, I stopped off at Leslie Landon's place, Leslie and Brian Matthews, and Mike Jr. was there. The family was there, and I hung out with them, and I was like a zombie, just dumb, just bleh.
I can't imagine, because again, obviously, I get all the benefits of the show without any of the responsibility, and you have all the responsibility of being everyone's avatar into that world and into that experience. We'll be back after these messages. Hey, I'm Patrick Labyorteaux, and I play an actor on TV, and I've been doing this for a long, long time. And I know what it's like if you are in a class with people, and sometimes you just want to have that one-on-one connection with the person that you're working with to go over, I don't know, a particular scene, or maybe you have an audition, or maybe you just want the privacy to try stuff that you don't really know is going to work and not have anyone look at you. Well, I have the perfect solution for you. It's called One-on-One with Patrick Labyorteaux. You can book your time at workingactorsschool.com, and it's just me and you for an hour going over whatever it is you want to work on, breaking down the script, talking about character, figuring out your intention, the spine of the scene, everything that goes in to making a dynamite performance. So if you're interested in acting and want that one-on-one personal attention, check out One-on-One with Patrick Labyorteaux. You can find all the information you need at workingactorsschool.com. Act 4, questions. We're here in the questions, and we're going to ask you a couple of questions. First question, these are Tina's Got to Know. It's my wife. She had came up with this list of questions. So okay. Tina's Got to Know. First question is, that's SheauxBiz. What is the most Hollywood moment in your life?
I'll try and condense this story as much as possible. I had an agent, Michael Black, who was at CAA, and he was, or ICM. He was also Rob Lowe's agent. We were together at the time. So Rob had done The Outsiders with Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze was doing a show at the Beverly Hills Playhouse, a dance show. And Rob couldn't go because he was shooting St. Elmo's Fire. And so Michael and I went to the show and saw Patrick Swayze. And then after, we went to Spago, where we were met by Rob and Andrew McCarthy. So we were sitting at a table, Michael, me, Rob, and Andrew McCarthy. And then the door, there was like a commotion at the door, and Liza Minnelli came in and beelined and sat down at our table. and was hiding alcoholic beverages because she wasn't supposed to be drinking by putting them in front of me. So at one point I had 4 wines and three screwdrivers in front of me. And then her sister came in, and Liza was like drinking under the table, and Lorna Luft was there. Then there was another commotion at the door, and Michael Jackson came in, and he came and sat at our table. And in the meantime, I keep looking at Rob going, what's going on? Please, I have to go. I want to go home. I'm scared of all of this. And he goes, no, just sit here. We're going to be okay. And so we finish our meal, and Wolfgang's bringing us pizzas that he's made, and he's sitting down, and people are hovering around. Michael Jackson is not saying a word. And then we finish our meal, and we're trying to figure out where to go. And Michael Jackson, only thing he says the whole night, you can come to my house. I got a llama. And I leaned over to Rob, and I said, I really have to go home now. You have to take me home. And Liza goes, no, we're going to Sammy's. I figured Sammy's is some after-hour club. Michael Jackson leaves. We go to Sammy Davis Jr.'s house. The evening will not bloody end. Liza's wasted. I'm at Sammy Davis Jr.'s house, and I'm going to end it with the final story, because there's more, but this is the pièce de résistance. I'm now separated from my group. He's screening a Soldier Story. And every African-American actor in Hollywood is in the screening room. And people are like wandering about. And I go upstairs to the billiard room. And Sammy's in there making drinks. And I got the courage up and I walked over and I said, Mr. Davis. Yes, he says. I wish I could imitate him, but I can't. I said, I think you know my grandfather. And he said, oh, really? Who's your grandfather? Because I'm sure he hears stuff like that all the time. And I said, Harry Crane. And he goes, Hesh! What are you drinking? So he makes me a drink. He goes, hey, you want to play pool? And I said, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at it. I don't think so. He said, I have one eye. You'll win. And
I'm going to retire this question. There's not a better story. Holy shit.
It's a good one. It was the craziest night ever.
Oh my gosh. And that, there's no topping that. Okay, so question number 2. That's SheauxBiz part 2. What's the most embarrassing Hollywood moment in your life?
Most embarrassing Hollywood moment. Most embarrassing.
I'll tell you, for me, I just visited my agent and I didn't get a part that I was really hoping for, and I was in a foul mood. So I get in the elevator and there's this big heavy-set guy running down with a bunch of scripts waiting for the elevator, and I just didn't hold the elevator for him because I was being a jerk. And as the doors close, I see it's Francis Ford Coppola running towards me. And I'm like, I could have been on an elevator with Francis Ford Coppola.
I loved the show Nip Tuck. Really loved the show. I was like a huge Nip Tuck fan. And I had an audition. I had to audition. And so I went in and I was really nervous. And I read, and they had me read again. I was reading for Ryan Murphy and everybody. And as I walked in, there was like this big metal sculpture of a banana plant, but it was all metal, like brassy. And I read and everything was okay and it went really well, but I was still like so nervous. And I got up, and as I was backing away, I was saying, thank you so much for having me in. I hope this works out. If it doesn't, I'm still going to be a fan. I'm always going to watch. And I turned and I walked right into the sculpture, knocked it over, cut my face, and I got up going, so sorry. And, the thing's going, wow, 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 wow. And I picked the plant up and I walked out, and I thought, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. There's no way. And I get in the car and my agent calls and says, you got the part. You need to go do makeup. They have to make a cast of your breast right away. And I was like, but I didn't even know what the whole story was. And I said, what's I know the dog has bit my nipple off, but why? And he goes, because you put peanut butter all over your body and let the dog lick it off when your husband's out of town. I was, oh no. I can't believe I said I wanted to do this. Okay. And that was it. I guess they must have liked my klutziness.
Oh my gosh, that's the second one I can't ask anyone else. Okay, Show Me the Money, number 3. Show Me the Money. What would be your biggest missed financial opportunity? Now, I'm not looking for numbers, but like,
Oh, I
obviously
got it.
in
No,
this
it's right.
town-
It's like,
oh, okay,
it's
great.
there. I see it all the time. When I lived in New York the first time when I was doing Shane and Madel, and I was a newlywed, I had a brand new baby boy. My then husband, Bo, and I were living in a brownstone on West 12th between Washington and Greenwich in the West Village. And it was a 4-story brownstone. And we lived on the bottom 2 floors, and there was a floor through to a courtyard with a giant tree and a garden in the middle of New York City. And the people who owned it said, you know, we're thinking of selling, and would you be interested in buying? And I said, well, how much? And they said 1.2 million. And I was like, I think we might go back to LA. The place just sold for $25 million.
Oh, that's so painful. As soon as you mentioned Brownstone, I'm like going, oh, this is not going to be, yeah.
Brownstone
Yeah.
with the tallest tree in Lower Manhattan in the back courtyard.
I'm not a New York guy, but I can respect that. That sounds
dumb.
beautiful. Okay, Show and Tell, number 4, Show and Tell. As a teenager, what is the favorite poster that you had in your room, and how'd you come to get it?
I didn't have posters in my room. I had in my locker at school, but I was rarely there. David Cassidy, Scott Baio.
Sure.
No accounting for taste, I guess.
Hey, Scott was a different guy.
Yep.
We did a whole show with Scott, and Scott's a super professional guy, and I think he's hysterical. Just don't agree with some things.
Some things, all things, most things. Yeah. Not big on the posters. I liked
All right.
antiques even when I was a kid. Weird.
Like what?
I liked antiques.
Okay, good to know. Sheaux Down. What is the best thing you've ever done and the worst thing you've ever done professionally? Kids
Professionally.
obviously is professionally. Like, what are you the most proud of as far as your work? And like you go, I really was horrible in that.
The Miracle Worker and the last Little House movie, Bless. I think it was Bless All the Dear Children. No, that was Bless All the Dear Children. No.
I call it they blowed it up real good. I don't know the real name.
No, not the bloated up one, which was
Oh.
okay. It was we did 3 movies and we did one where someone kidnapped baby Rose, and I just was like, at that point, first of all, I'd already been married to Dean Butler for many years, and I was just not in. It was not my thing, and so and then they gave us a kid, and I'm like 18.
Yeah.
And I checked out. I just walked through the whole movie.
That is interesting. Like I tell a quick story of on JAG, it started off as an action adventure show, and then we ended up as this courtroom drama type of thing because production and everything. And for you as well. I mean, you started off, Little House was about a girl's adventure in the prairie, which is why I loved it. I watched it because it was like, oh, that girl's my age and she's doing all this cool stuff. And then you end up like, it's like 30 something, like 1830 something. It's like where it's like just sort of like a lifestyle show where you've got a kid and you're trying to teach, and it's just a different show by then.
Yeah, more coffee, Manly. I wanted to be Pa, not Ma.
Oh, that's for sure. You were more Pa than you were ever Ma. Okay, no show. What part did you want but didn't get?
I wanted but didn't get recently or historic.
Anything. Like, what's the thing in your head that goes, oh, I really wanted blank, but I didn't get it?
Oh God, now I can't think the title of it. But I auditioned a few years ago for the Jeremy Allen White, Zac Efron wrestling movie.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The Iron Claw.
Iron Claw.
And I can't, obviously, I'm so, oh God, it's just one of those brain farts. Can't think. Maura Tierney got the role, and she was brilliant in it. But I really, really wanted that role, and I worked really hard on my audition, but Didn't work out.
Yeah, it's always difficult. As a producer, you also know that sometimes, I was just explaining this to my class, that when they cast, they're casting the people they want. They're not casting the people that, they're not judging your talent. And
No, and
it's
you
really
you have to
hard.
look the right, you know,
Yeah,
age,
it's
you
like
have
what
to
they're
have the
filtering
right
for as opposed to.
coloring, and- yeah, there's so much more to it. And, you know, I was disappointed for a day and then I was over it. Because if you
There you
can't
go.
handle rejection, you can't be an actor.
It's not, no. And that's
There's
why my
no
brother
way.
doesn't do on camera anymore. He does voiceover because it's like he just didn't want to put up with walking into the room going, "Oh, Albert." It's
Yeah,
like,
well,
okay,
righteous
great.
though. If you don't want to do, if you can't and it's
Yeah.
not your thing, don't do it. I happen to just let it roll off my back like a duck. Let's
Two more questions.
Whatever.
Show Me Again. What's the movie you rewatched the most?
The movie I rewatched the most. Oh, it's kind of a toss-up, and probably there's a couple. Jaws. Giant. And The Exorcist.
I wouldn't normally follow this question up because those are great choices and I totally get it. But because of who you are, I'm guessing at some point you've met Steven Spielberg. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you ever ask him about Jaws or talk to him about Jaws?
No. He called me in for a general meeting when I was in my early 20s, I want to say, and we just kind of hung out and played video games. And then I also did a preliminary reading of Always before they actually cast the cast. So I did
The
that.
Holly Hunter role?
Yeah, I did that reading, fully knowing that I wasn't going anywhere with it. But I think he just wanted to get a bunch of actors together to hear it.
Right. Very cool. Okay, well, final question. Show me some love. What's your favorite performance of mine?
What's my favorite performance of yours? You had some classics on our show. The Cheaters. Was it The Cheaters?
Yep. Cheaters is the name.
Cheaters was pretty great. The Wolves was pretty
The
great.
Wolves. I got to tell you, I still have to apologize to you for the Wolves. So I tell this story because the Wolves, I'd watched Bunny in the Race on like a Wednesday, right? I auditioned for Michael on Thursday, and I'm in the hay loft with you on a Friday, right? For the Wolves. And I'm still full on fan. I'm just like going, so in this episode, what happens here? And you're like so sweet, but you're like at one point halfway through the day, you're like, dude, you're on the show. Just chill out. Just relax.
Did I?
Yeah, but you did it in the nicest way. But it was like, I was basically just harassing you. And again, as you remember, I wasn't that bright of a kid. Nice guy, but not that bright in the sense that I went around after that episode and said goodbye to everybody. And again, it was you. It was like, but you're in the next
You're not
episode.
leaving.
Like, what? You're not leaving. Where are you going? No one had told me that I was going to be on the show. They just said I was doing the show, and I thought I was doing an episode. So yeah, my apology for being an idiot.
I think, as I recall, too, didn't they? There was a kid for a hot second that got fired, right?
What I understood
That
it
was
to be
not
was
that was not an easy thing to do on our show, but he had to have been horrid.
the story I heard, and I love it because it just checks all the boxes of how that place worked. And that's the reason why I auditioned Thursday and started work on Little House on a Friday, literally, was there was a kid playing Andy Garvey. Mr. Edwards moved away, so they moved in even a bigger guy with a bigger beard and his family. And the kid who got the part was eating, and as you remember, I think it was Thursdays, Fridays, it would be lobster, steak and lobster, right?
Yep.
For the crew. Steak and lobster. And I heard that this kid said, not steak and lobster again, as Michael was walking by. Yeah. And like, I pictured in my head, like as Michael's walking by, him looking, and by the time he gets to the end of the table, the kid's been fired. Because that's not the way Michael worked. Michael didn't have a trailer.
It was that, and he didn't know his lines. I remember that.
Well, there you go. That's never going to work.
Nope.
Epilogue. Tim's a huge deal. He seems like a really great guy. I got to meet him. You guys moved and you're living in this upstate area. You're getting back to kind of like your roots, which was in Simi Valley. I mean, it's weird to think that a TV star grew up on the prairie, but certainly not the prairie. There's no hills in the prairie, but Simi Valley is definitely rural. And you've got Modern Prairie now. You're doing this thing where it's kind of like, what is it? Dr. Strangelove, embrace the mom. It's like you've kind of embraced the whole prairie thing, and you're doing the Modern Prairie thing. Was all of this combined, or did one thing lead to another to get you to where you are now? And what was the motivating factor?
It definitely wasn't a plan. We moved up here. We moved to New York City to work, and we knew that we needed to have an escape from the city. So we found this dilapidated hunting cabin, which we began to convert to have as a weekend getaway. And it became livable right about the holidays of 2019. So when COVID hit and we locked down up here because we weren't going to stay in the city.
Right.
And during that process, we'd always talked about having a garden and having chickens. Well, that was the time to do it. So we built it all ourselves. Couldn't find chickens to save our lives. Chickens were like toilet paper. Everyone was buying toilet paper and chickens. We finally found chickens, so we started raising our first chickens. And I was posting about all of this and posting our menus and the recipes I was cooking. And CBS This Morning got excited and decided to send someone up to interview me. Mo Rocca came up. And so I did an interview about it, and they talked about it in Back to the Prairie. And my literary agent called me after seeing it and said, Back to the Prairie is a book. It's a book. Yeah. And I said, really? I'd already written an autobiography, a cookbook, and a children's book. And he said, it's time for an update. Your life has changed. Let's do it again. And so I wrote Back to the Prairie. And
okay.
Right about the same time, I've been toying with this idea that there's some sort of prairie, that kind of clothing home line, but I let it go for years. And then I became friends with Nicole Haase, who is now my partner in Modern Prairie. She comes from the retail world. She's brilliant. She was, Greg Williams of Williams-Sonoma's right-hand gal. She launched Tabletop for Williams-Sonoma. She was working with a company that did swimwear, and we had a mutual friend who introduced us. And I was like, I can't find a bathing suit. It's torture when you're a woman, period. But when you're a woman of a certain age and your body's changing, buying a swimsuit is worse than jeans. It's torture. And she was like, I got your back. And so much so, she fitted me in swim. I had like 20 swimsuits. I was like, I'll take a picture for Instagram. I'll do an Instagram live with you. And we started chatting, and I told her that I had this, there's this prairie something. I don't know what it is. She said, let me get back to you. And she came up with this whole deck for Modern Prairie. So we could take the prairie, the community, which is the biggest part of Modern Prairie, the love, the supporting one another, and
it's that line of women waiting at the table, basically.
That's who they are. And now, because of Modern Prairie, and they're on our app, they're on our email list, but on our app, which I'm on every day, they're supporting each other now. It's been 3 years. They're getting together and doing things together. They attend our grief support groups and our caregiver support groups. All of our events are free. And our fun stuff like watercolor painting or needle felting or quilting, pie making. And it's just, it's grown in leaps and bounds, and now is a multi-million-dollar business. Neither of us.
It's beautiful. The website's amazing. If you ever want to go to a website and see pictures of Melissa Gilbert, that's the place to go.
Oh my God! Well, I'm still the main model. We have other models.
But of
now.
course, no. But there's nothing wrong with that. That's exactly that's what it is. That's the whole ethos. And you see these people at the conventions, and it's like, I mean, I hate to make this radical of a comparison, but it's like Star Wars. There's people that fall in love with the world in the same way that they're falling in love with the prairie world, which is way more real. You can really live a certain lifestyle in that way where it's comfortable and
Well, and we're
express yourself.
we're very much dedicated to elevating women, particularly the seasoned woman, as we call her, which I am, and giving us a place to be appreciated and understood, and to one of the things that I was just reading on the app, and we say this all the time, is when you see elephants in the wild and a female elephant is injured, the other female elephants surround her until she's better. And that's literally what we're doing for one another. And the majority of the businesses that we work with, our collaborators, are female owned or family owned. They're all here in the United States. And it's making a difference. We have women who are now, we've got women on the app who are going through chemo for the first time, but there are women who've been through it before them who are sharing their experiences together. It's a really wonderful thing to see happen. And these women are now trying new things. They're traveling to new places together, or they're trying new jobs. And so many of us at this age are just kind of pushed aside. We're either that doddering old crone or that horrible Mrs. Kravitz. Right. And we're so much more than that. So we're helping women to come out of their shells now in this last third of our lives and get the appreciation and respect that we deserve.
I think it's amazing. And I think you guys have done a great job with that. There's that word again, compassion. It's like it's infused throughout the whole idea, which I think makes it different than just sort of like a marketing thing that's like it could be easy to do a marketing thing, but there's no joy in that. And, I'm sure that you get
it's soulless
much more out of
work
it.
if it's that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the heart.
So let me ask you this. So you're doing this. I'm not saying that one stops the other, and there are different phases in everyone's life. Do you think of doing acting at some point? I mean, not like you're not doing acting now.
I'm acting. Last season, there's a show on Hallmark that Michael Landon Jr. produces called When Calls the Heart. It's been on, this is season 13. And last year, after being at the 50th, he was like, we should maybe, so he called me and he said, would you do an arc? And I said, well, of course. I mean, yeah, put a corset on me and some lace-up shoes. I'm all in. So they brought me in as the love interest for Jack Wagner, who's their older leading man on the show. I like to say I'm no longer an ingenue, I'm an old genou. And it went really well, so I'm going back this year for 5 more episodes. And so this summer I'll be back and forth to Vancouver. And, I just did a play in the city, a 2-hander with a wonderful actor named Mark Moses, where I walked around on stage in a bra and panties, for the love of Mike. Nerve-wracking.
For the love of Mike Landon.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to have him in the audience seeing that.
Well, he probably would have been in the audience without a shirt on and his suspenders on with that big hat.
It's only fair.
It's only fair. Well, okay, good. So, I mean, obviously, Jack Wagner, by the way, we had him on our show, the C-Dad Run thing that we did, and I really enjoyed working with him. He seems like a really
good
nice
egg.
guy.
He's a really
and
good egg.
Mike Landon Jr. is like just such a sweetheart and so talented. So I'm glad that show's been going for a long time.
Yep, a long time. And for me, it's like going home, knowing that he's watching.
I can imagine, right? I mean, literally, it's the same ethos.
Definitely the same vibe. And even though it takes place in 1920, it's great. It's a lovely, lovely show. So it's nice to be a part of something like that. I'm constantly doing little indie stuff with Tim. We just did a play reading that my son wanted to do in the city. So I'm always working, and acting will always be my first love. I love it.
Do you guys like working together, you and Tim?
We love it. He's my favorite director of all the directors I've worked with.
I've never got the chance, but I've heard everywhere he's a really good director.
He's such a good director. He's an actor's director, and he loves working with actors, and they love him. And he's just so smart. He's just so smart, and he's an amazing
good for the
actor.
smartest girl in class.
Exactly. I married the smart boy.
Melissa, you've been delightful. Thank you so much for taking your time. I know today's been a very busy day for you. Many, many congratulations, but thank you so much.
Anytime. This was a blast. I loved it. It was really fun.
the Patrick Labyorteaux, Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad that you're enjoying the podcast and checking it out. It is an audio podcast wherever you get your audio podcast, and it's a video podcast over on YouTube. My socials are all patrick.labyorteaux, and that is on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok. I'm everywhere. If you want information on the school, you can go to workingactorsschool.com. We have classes going all the time. It's a lot of fun. I suggest you check it out. Hey, we'll see you next time.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux, Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.